Hey everyone, Michelle Seidling here with another episode of Military Transition Wellness, the podcast dedicated exclusively to those transitioning from military service. Today we're talking about finding your purpose and your passion and your direction in life after the military. Here to help us do that is Jim Hughes, the fabulous, amazing Jim Hughes, ready to transform your experience. Welcome to the podcast, Jim. This podcast is available on multiple platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and others. Please be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to be informed as new episodes become available. If you enjoyed today's episode or any of our episodes, please rate and review the podcast on your favorite platform. As always, check out our website at foodexperienceunplugged.com for some resources as you begin your health journey.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Delighted to be here.
Wow, fantastic to have you here. Will you take a moment to introduce yourself and what brought you to this point in your life and why the direction that you've chosen?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Jim Hughes, founder of a coaching and events business called Untamed. Currently living in the UK, the southwest of the UK. First time I've been settled in quite a long time in my adult life, but it's been a really interesting journey of traveling around the world. As I was saying, living in Western Canada for a few years in my 20s, then Western Australia for a few years in my 20s, and then living nomadically around the world for the previous 3 years up until 2020. And throughout all of that journey, I suppose where I am now is helping people become more aligned with who they truly are. At Untamed, that's what we're so desperate to do, is helping people live to their fullest potential and become aligned. And when I say aligned, I mean living in accordance with their true gifts, not muting their personality, connecting with their true self, not a learned self, not the fearful self, understanding what their inspirations are, understanding their fears, understanding who they want to serve, how they want to serve, and who they want to be, and then helping them make the decisions to actually bring those, who they truly are and how they're living in alignment. Because when we're out of alignment, that's when we're most stressed. I mean, if you can think of the wheel of a car, if you point one of those wheels in a car in the wrong direction, and you still try and go forward, there's so much extra tension on that wheel and on all the other adjoining components. There's extra noise, there's extra stress, you burn more fuel, it's harder to steer. And our life is exactly the same. And having lived that way for a few years when I was in Australia, I know the cost. I ultimately ended up running an engineering business. I'm not qualified in engineering, I have no interest in it, but it was such an exciting journey early on of growth and thriving in chaos and uncertainty, that it hid the fact that I was really misaligned, that it was the wrong industry for me, that it was a role that didn't mute my personality, that muted my personality. Sorry, it didn't leverage my gifts. And it was only until after a while I realized how costly that was on my level of health and my level of stress and my performance and my relationships and everything. So ever since that moment, it's been, okay, life is way too short to live like this. You can have your cake and eat it too. And how can I help people make that journey?
Wow, that is amazing. So that engineering stint, if you will, was that early on, right after university, or was it more? Where did that fall in your whole life lineup, so to speak?
Yeah, I finished uni when I was 21, and I was like, right, I've just spent 3 years partying, drinking, not studying very hard. It's time for a bit of me time. So I wasn't ready for adult life just yet. So that's when I moved to Western Canada, and it was 5 years of adventure, road trips, ski instructing. I trained up as a plumber and was just thrown in the deep end on that front, and it was 5 years of fun and adventure essentially. And then towards the end of my time over in Whistler, my liver couldn't really handle anymore. My wallet couldn't handle anymore. I'd broken a few bones. I was like, okay, kind of enough is enough. So I realized I thought I needed to become a bit more of an adult. So that's when I moved over to Australia. And I was really keen on being sponsored over there. I didn't just want to do a year and then work in a bar or anything like that. I wanted to make a proper fist of it. And I ended up with this opportunity to be sponsored by a company, but it involved, and this is a very long story, so I don't know how long your podcast is. I won't go into the full detail, but at high level is I was given the opportunity that involved me pretending to be an electrical engineer for 8 months, where the person who hired me he sent me into his client's office on secondment with a completely fabricated resume that said I had a degree in electrical engineering and 4 years work experience. And I had to kind of blag this job I ended up doing that job for 8 months. But from there, I came back to the head office and I ended up running that company. And it was exciting, but it was also extremely difficult and hard work and very stressful. So that was probably, how old was I when I probably started running that business? Let's call it 27, 28, something like that. My first kind of proper job. Bit of a deep end dive.
Oh, now after that deep dive, how did you, I guess, come up to breathe some air and really find your alignment as you described it?
It was a very long journey. It would be much easier and more conducive to good marketing and podcasting if there was just like one moment where I was like, aha, I have it now. This is my new path. But they're the stories we read about, and that's what people think, that our passion just lands on our lap. But in most cases, it involves a lot of hard work and self-discovery. So there came a point where enough was enough for me, where the life I was living at the moment was too costly, and it was impacting me too much, and I needed to change. What that change looked like, I wasn't yet sure. So all I did was just start investigating, basically start learning about me, who I was, what I'm inspired by, what my strengths were, the kind of business. I knew I wanted to run my own business. I knew I wanted to be entrepreneurial in some way, but it just, where did that start? And if you can think of it, the way I describe it is like if you're imagining a boat in the middle of the ocean, you've got no coastline to orient yourself. And a lot of people are just sort of sailing along, but they're not entirely sure why they're going in a certain direction, what's at the end of that point. So at the beginning of that journey, I've got 360 degrees potential routes I could take. So you just do the big low hanging fruit first. Well, okay, it's entrepreneurialism I want to do. Right. Well, that rolls out, 310 degrees of options. So I'm only left with 50 degrees worth of angle to aim for. And the more clarity you get, the more clarity I got. Okay, well, it needs to have variety. It needs to be involved with people. I want to be helping people. I love the psychology element, understanding people's emotions. I love the business element too. It has to be flexible. When you start layering on those pieces of information or those clarity, you just start ruling out options, and it gets narrower and narrower. And that's ultimately the journey I went on. And it took me. It's never ending, of course, but the main gist of it was about 18 months, and it was what 20,000-30,000 pounds worth of self-development. I flew across the world to attend different events. I trained up in certain psychological tooling, and I read countless books, attended loads of seminars and retreats, and all in the name of figuring my next path, my next chapter.
Okay. Now, is this untamed journey or this adventure here, is this the result of all of that introspection and pondering and so forth?
Yes, ultimately, yes. I realized there was one moment when I actually attended it was a weekend accelerator program in Bali. So I flew from Western Australia to Bali, which is not too far away. And that was probably my single biggest epiphany, aha moment. From that, I didn't create a business. I created the idea of a business, the logo and the name and all the easy stuff that involved getting people together at events and connecting entrepreneurs with investments. But the nature of those events was having fun, not taking itself too seriously, getting up to adventures, and basically having a really good time. So my main focus at that point was allowing me to be me. And I don't take myself too seriously. I want to have fun. I want to be helping people, but not being too stuffy or stifling with it. And that was the basis. Long story short, that ended up being a slightly misaligned idea. It wasn't quite right for me at the time. It was too big. It wasn't quite inspiring enough. So after a series of more clarity, the coaching business that is now Untamed spawned. It's gone through a couple of guises. It started with business coaching, and then it moved to the more personal stuff. And like I said, it's a never-ending journey of iterations. But yes, that journey is ultimately what's led me to where I am now.
Fantastic. Now, on the flip side, as you're paying it forward, how are you helping people to find that alignment and that purpose that you've gone through after many years and different angst, so to speak?
It's taken lots of different iterations in terms of how I help people, the kind of the tools I give people, or the questions I ask. But ultimately, it boils down to self-awareness. The more somebody can understand who they truly are, and I will repeat this. I've said it already a couple of times, but I will say it again. if you can understand who you truly are, not the learned self, not the side of you who you think you should be based on the fact that you're trained in it, not the side of you that thinks you should pursue a path because, especially military transition, having worked with a lot of veterans, not the side of you that feels like you should go into finance and work for JP Morgan Chase or Morgan Stanley or whoever it is straight after the military. Not that side of you because the side that feels you should because other people do it, but the real authentic you. And that comes through a lot of deep work, group work, one-on-one work, where we're looking at people's past, we're looking at their patterns, we're looking at their behavior. I focus a lot on language. You can read a lot in this, and I know you've got a psychological background, so you can read a lot in between the words that people are using. That says so much about how they feel, how the assumptions they make, the place they feel like they have in the world, and just drilling down from the symptom that they present at the beginning of the work to the actual cause.
Okay. And that drilling process, what does that look like when the rubber meets the road? What does that look like in terms of how they start doing something like that?
It varies depending on the person. I don't follow a prescriptive formula as to how my coaching sessions go. So I couldn't kind of guide you through, we do step 1, and then we do step 2, then we do step 3. It really does depend on the conversation. But ultimately, if you were to kind of put some structure behind it, it's the first journey is understanding, okay, where are you now? Where on the map are you? Because if you're going on a journey, a map is useful. And for a map, you need 2 things: not just knowing where you're going, but you also need to know where you are. So let's get a clear vision of what you're currently challenged by. How are your challenges manifesting themselves? Are you frustrated? Are you exhausted? Are you anxious? Are you depressed? Are you happy? You just want to optimize. If you are burnt out, where do you feel like that burnout comes from? Let's analyze that. And of course, they will present their current situation. They will present what they believe to be the cause. Well, I might have burnt out because I'm an entrepreneur and I work 15 hours a day and my clients demand so much. I mean, I had this conversation literally today. I'm burnt out because my clients are too demanding. Right. Okay. They believe that's the cause, but in fact, that's the symptom. What is leading to that situation existing? What are you doing as a client? Talking to my client, what are you creating? What beliefs are you holding and assumptions you're making that is perpetuating that story? Because you are creating that. That's not your clients, that's you. You're allowing that to happen. And the conversation I had today, if you were to boil it right down, was that they've always been taught, trained, grown up believing that if you're going to have any fun, you need to earn it, and letting people down is a cardinal sin. So sure enough, she has this narrative which she's had from the age of 7 years old about letting people down, about working hard and earning your crust, so that now she can't take a holiday without taking her laptop and without responding to clients. That's not a client problem. That's not a time blocking problem. That is a narrative. That is a belief. And these things can perpetuate in people. And as I said to this woman, your ego loves the idea that you are so important that you can't leave your clients for a week. It wants you to believe that, but ultimately it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that's just an example of the kind of work that we do, where we're drilling down and say, right, okay, it's actually my beliefs and my stories and the meaning I assign certain behaviors that are creating my current situation. How can we then establishing whether they serve you or not, whether you want to maintain some of those and ditch a few others, and if so, if you're going to ditch them, what more positive, more self-serving narratives can we replace those with?
I love it. I love the fact that, people come to you saying, hey, this is what I think the problem is. But when you drill down, when you have those crucial conversations, you get down to, okay, here's the real root cause of what ails you.
Absolutely.
And then going forward from there.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
absolutely.
Fantastic. Now, are you seeing, that was just one example that you mentioned, but is there really a gamut of experiences? Do some people come to you totally burned out about whatever ails them, versus maybe someone's going to come with more of a purpose already, and then they just need a little bit of, a small adjustment per se?
There is a fairly, well, not a broad range, I'd say. I mean, it's already fairly niche, the topic, but there is a broader range. But generally speaking, if I could pigeonhole the main scenario I face is, or the main sort of challenges I face when I'm speaking to a client, is they are at a transition point in their life, be it from a military career to a post-military career. be it from one business to another business, be it from a pro sports world to a post pro sports life. And the people who I generally work with are the people who are the high performers. And by high performing, I don't just mean the outcomes, the outputs have been to a high level. I mean, they have an insatiable appetite for growth. They're never satisfied. They can't settle. They always want more, which in lots of cases is brilliant and has contributes to their success. But it's a double-edged sword, because it's that same energy is what has gotten them to the point of being burnt out. And I'll explain why. Going back to the car analogy, if one wheel is pointing out of alignment with the rest of them, the people I work with, and I consider myself in the past one of these people, that if in doubt, we push that accelerator down harder. It's like, right, something's not working here. The car's juddering about, it's slowing down. I'm finding it hard to steer. I know what I'll do. I'll try harder. Same in life. Right. I feel like they don't even say this consciously. Something's not right. I'm not earning enough money. I'm not satisfied. I can't rest. My relationships are suffering. I know what I'll do. I'm going to work harder. I'll double down. I'll try and get more clients. I'll try and do more of this and more of that. And that same energy is what got them into this situation, and is not the energy they need to get out. So the people I work with, typically it's a burnout, it's an exhaustion somewhere on that spectrum. And it's about the work that we do is typically around, okay, let's talk about slowing down. Let's understand where the drivers come from and confirm whether or not you want to continue on this path of burnout. And if not, what the alternative looks like. And it's usually just about connecting. I mean, that drive, in lots of cases, it comes from a place of love and a desire to achieve more. But ultimately, to a large extent, that drive is coming from a place of fear. If I stop driving, I will be left behind. If I stop pushing, I will fail. If I stop pushing, I will be judged. If I stop pushing, I won't succeed. I won't be able to provide for my family. Insert the blank. But in most cases, it's coming from that place of fear. And if the intention is to avoid a pain or to alleviate a fear, then the destination of that action is never a positive one. Certainly not in the main.
Okay, so people are doing this thinking, okay, I've got to just do more, when in fact they just need to step back and do less.
They need to step back, and they need to be comfortable with slowing down. And I use the words masculine and feminine energy, and I know that will put some people off, but the masculine energy of like, right, I have a challenge. I need to find a solution. I need to get from point A to point B and as quickly as possible. Men, the masculine, not just men, but the masculine energy is all about making that problem go away or shrinking it and being direct. And that's a very achieving energy. It's a very push energy. It's a very there's a lot of force behind it, and it's incredibly useful. We need to have that energy. But a lot of the time, and it's men and women I'm working with that have probably an abundance of that, and maybe are lacking the feminine energy, which is more fluid, which is more okay with saying, hey, I don't know, which is more okay with just saying, well, let's just try it and kind of see where it goes. This is an exploration. I'm an invitation, and I don't need to know the answer. And we should all, man and woman, we should all have a balance of the two. They're absolutely essential, because when we're in that masculine energy, we're not as creative. We haven't got time to connect as much. And if you stay in that position for too long, or that energy for too long, it's knackering, to put it bluntly.
Sure, absolutely. Now, with that, what are some questions that people should be considering as they're transitioning out of the military, as far as starting on that journey to find your purpose, to find what your alignment is, so to speak?
I'm so glad you framed it that way, because we just ran an Untamed event last week, and the whole basis of the coaching content of that event was about helping people find the right questions, not finding the answers. Einstein says, if you give me an hour to find a problem or whatever, or if you give me an answer to solve if you give me an hour to solve a problem, I will spend the first 55 minutes of that looking for the right question, and only 5 minutes of that finding the answer. So I'm glad you framed it like, what are the questions people can ask? Because that's ultimately what's so important. Our brains are like a Google search, and the quality of our answers will be determined by the quality of the question. So if someone leaves the military and their question, and most of the time this will be a subconscious thing, not a conscious thing. If their question is, how can I create as much certainty in my life as I can to maintain the paycheck that I was on so I can still provide for my family? The answers that they get back will be dependent on that question. So the answer they get back will be, okay, well, here's a job in a financial sector. You might not love it, but at least you got a steady paycheck. But because in their question, they haven't sought to be fulfilled, or they haven't sought to be inspired, or they haven't sought to be energized by what they're doing, the chances of them finding something that does that are very slim. So my question, if they could only ask one question of themselves, it's like, how can I be my most authentic self? Or what path will allow me to be my most authentic self? And I know for most people, for a lot of people, that's going to sound massively vague, very unhelpful, and probably quite woo-woo. But just sit with that for a sec. If you are authentic and you can show up to your work, whether it's your own business or working in a job, and you can be all of you, and again, I mean the real you, not the learned you, that's ultimately, I believe, should be everybody's goal. Because when you are in that state, that's when you are at your most energized. It's when you're most successful. That is when you will also earn the most. It's when you'll have the best connections and the best connection with yourself. So always find which of these paths will allow me to be my most authentic self. And just be really, really honest with yourself when you go through these questions and say, well, what is my intention? And this is a big word, intention. What is my intention for going down this particular path? Let's say they get two options. One option is like a startup, and it's a bit vague. It's a bit new. The company's only a year old. The pay is okay, but it might not be as much as they're on. Let's say they're a captain or, a major, or even doesn't matter. Sergeant major doesn't matter. The pay isn't as good. It's a bit vague. I don't know the exact direction of the company because the founders don't either, but kind of feels quite exciting and maybe a bit chaotic. I get a bit more freedom. I get to create more. I get to drive the strategy. And then you got this other option, which is it's working. And I know it sounds like I'm bashing the financial sector, but you have no idea how many veterans I've spoken to who come to me because they've left the military, gone into the financial sector as a knee-jerk reaction, and then come to me because they've realized they took that job for the wrong reason in Britain and in the UK. So I'm using that as an example. I don't have anything against the financial sector. It's only if it's aligned with you. So let's say the second option in that scenario is a job at one of the big firms, and the paycheck is 30% more than they're on, and the hours are solid. The contract is a 5-year contract, so in their mind that's 5 years worth of security, which it isn't, by the way. You get your medical, you get your holidays, you get all this stuff, and there's more certainty that you can take home to your family, be it your husband or your wife, and say, look, this is what I can provide for us. If the intention, and you're wrestling those two options, if the intention is just for security, because you're afraid of missing out, you're afraid of failure, if the intention is to avoid that happening, you're probably going to pursue the path that's least authentic to you. And then you're going to get that job. The pay will become very boring very quickly, because psychologically pay is a terrible incentive, because you get used to it within weeks. And then it becomes about, okay, I'm not fulfilled here. This is boring. This is X, Y, and Z. Now, that I've oversimplified, because you can have the pay and the security and everything and the excitement and fulfillment as well. But and I don't want to ever suggest that somebody can't have that blend. But I'm using that as an example of two kind of sort of extremes of options that people are presented with that I've seen many times. So the question they should be asking is, what's the intention behind this decision?
Okay. And then having the courage to say, okay, maybe the intention is, well, a little more uncertainty. Maybe I want to go in that direction. Or on the flip side, maybe that is my intention to go with the financial sector and have those things that you described.
Yeah, courage, trust are absolutely essential, and awareness. So let's say you've got those two options, and you go, you know what, I'm actually going to go down the financial, secure, potentially boring, misaligned route, but I'm going to do it with my eyes wide open. I'm going to do it consciously, and I'm going to do it for a purposeful period of time. I'm going to try it with my eyes wide open. Do I like it? Is the money all it's cracked up to be? Am I missing something? Am I going to fall in love with it? And then know that whilst you're doing that, because you're conscious and you're aware, you've got those data points to then make a decision after that. And on the flip side, having the trust to go, right, I'm going to go down the less secure route, but it's going to be a bit exciting, but I trust myself and my husband and my wife and my family and what have you. I trust myself, I trust our relationship, and I trust as a family unit that no matter what happens, we're going to be okay. Whether this doesn't work out to be the best thing ever, it doesn't matter. We will be okay. So there's trust and there's awareness playing in both sides of that it's absolutely essential, in my opinion.
Yes, and from a wellness perspective, having that solid relationship with your spouse to begin with, to say, okay, hey, here's what I really think we should do. I want to kind of go into that uncertainty, and having that
Yeah.
confidence that, okay, are we going to be okay? Are we going to be able to put food on the table, etc.?
Oh yeah.
That's really, really crucial.
So true. The relationships are. I've spoken to so many people, and unfortunately, one of the biggest determining factors whether a coaching client succeeds in the growth journey that they're on with me is their other half. If their other half isn't on the journey with them because of their own decisions or indecisions, or the other half themselves, if they're fighting gravity all the time, if they're not on that journey together, then the chances of pursuing that authentic path are so much more reduced. So for anyone out there, bring your other half, or if partner, spouse, doesn't matter, bring whoever's close to you in on that journey. Share your fears, share your desires, be brutally honest with yourself, like connect underneath, like get rid of the head. The head will tell you what you feel like it wants the big paycheck, but ultimately underneath that, does it want that? And then share that and say, look, I think this is what I want, but my fears are I'm going to let you down. My fears are I'm not going to be enough. I'm going to be found out as an imposter, what have you. It's amazing the amount of time people make decisions based on assumptions of what their partner will put up with or will be afraid of, but they don't even have that conversation in the first place. Then they pursue this path because they say, oh, no, I've got to provide for, let's say it's my wife, I've got to provide for my wife, my kids. Yeah, no, she really needs this money and she really wants me to do this. And that's an assumption. They never even had that conversation. And ultimately, when it gets so stressful, they have to have that conversation because they're about to flip. My wife goes, no, honey, I want you to do what you do. I want you to be happy. That's most important. That's what we go, oh my God. And I had this at an event last week. The husband had never even communicated his challenges with her. He'd just taken on that burden of being the protector, the provider. There's ego involved in that as well. There's a lot of like, hey, look at me, I can deal with this. He couldn't, and he shouldn't have had to deal with it by himself. He was carrying so many assumptions without communicating with her. So yes, to, to come full circle, very long-winded way of saying yes, bring other people on that journey and be honest with them, and you'll be amazed. I imagine you'll be amazed by the connection that creates.
Mm, okay. Now, from a wellness perspective, are there any other aspects of wellness that stand out to you as people go on this journey of finding their alignment and really understanding themselves, so that to move forward out of the military with a little more confidence?
Well, obviously the work I'm dealing with is predominantly around mental health, and when you're stressed, you lose creativity. You don't make the best decisions. You see obstacles instead of opportunities. You become more fearful. We react poorly to things. So that's just one side. But wellness across the board, whether it's your sleep, whether it's your diet, whether it's your exercise, whether it's your relationships, and I'd say probably the latter above all of the others. I would say, and I'm sure you, based on the basis of your business, might disagree, but all of them are so critical. If you are to live a life of alignment, if you are to reach your true potential, if you are to truly connect with yourself, have amazing relationships, be happy, and be purposeful, you've got to stack the deck in your favor. And if you're trying to be those things, but your health is where you want it to be, you're not sleeping because you're too stressed. You can't go on holiday because you're afraid of what that might do to your business or your career, and you're keeping things to yourself because you're afraid of showing up authentically and vulnerably to your loved ones. Then your chances of success are so unbelievably slim. So sleep, like get proper sleep. And I'm sure the people on your listeners will know this by now from people better qualified to talk about this than me. But I heard that it's not. What did I hear? It was basically along the lines of it's not that we expose ourselves to too much stress; it's that we don't give ourselves enough recovery time in between stressful events. Now, I don't advocate surrounding your life with too much stress. Certainly not the bad stress, the kind of the niggling undercurrents of stress. Like that's never good. Stressing your body in like cold water therapy, for example, is very good. But give yourself the rest in between those times. Eat healthily, like get your nutrients, get your energy levels up, because when your energy levels are up, your confidence is up, and you can see those obstacles become opportunities, and that is a virtuous cycle, because you start to reinforce, you start to achieve what you want to do, you start to make the steps that you want to make, and then it reinforces itself. You go, okay, yeah, I've got this, and it just continues.
I love that. Just really really not putting your body through the ringer, not putting your relationships through the ringer, or any other aspect of your life.
Absolutely. And to go back to the relationship point, I think there's been quite a few studies. I think Harvard was the biggest study that said the biggest determining factor in lifespan was the quality of relationships. It was more so than obesity, more so than whether you smoked, more so than whether you drank. It was whether you had quality relationships into your older age. It's been proven so much, but obviously rather than wait until old age to get some good relationships, start them now, and you'll realize how incredibly valuable they are, not just from a wellness perspective in terms of having people to talk to, but having people who connect with who you truly are and who support you on your journey, not people who are trying to hold you back because they're afraid of who you can become. There's so much value in that. If you're to take one step to achieve what you want to achieve, it's surround yourself with who you believe to be the right people who support you, people who share your values, people who want to help you on that journey. They're the role models there that you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So I can't overstate enough the importance of your relationships.
Fantastic. Now, as we wrap up, any words of wisdom or really takeaways that stand out to you as people transition from the military and try to find that alignment?
Beyond what I've already said, I'd probably just sum up what I've already said and say, take pause and get clear on who you truly are. And I suppose one I can give your listeners an exercise to do. It's a really cool exercise, and it involves discovering what your flow state looks like. And flow, you may have heard of it, or your listeners may have heard of it. It's like being in the zone. When you're in a state of flow, it's when you're truly connected with what you're doing, when you're completely consumed by this task or activity, when you're challenged just to the right amount that it's stimulating, not too much that it's frustrating, or not too little that it's boring. It's very subconscious. It just feels natural. You hear athletes talk about being in the zone all the time. And crucially, when you're in flow, you have more energy at the end of that activity than you did at the beginning. And flow can last for a few seconds, it can last for a few hours or days. And if you can uncover what your flow states have been in your life up to now, so I say come up with 3 to 5 examples, the more the better, of when you're in flow. Think of moments when you were a broad cross section of examples. So at home, at work, in sports, with your friends, when you were alone, when you're outdoors, when you're indoors. Try and come up with a broad spectrum and break them down into who were you with, what were you doing, what was your role, and what was the outcome. And if you can break them down to those component parts, there's such a data rich moment in time that you can start to pull all the data from and start to create a picture. So you might learn from that experience. Wow, okay, for me to be truly in flow, well, it was when I was in operations in Afghanistan. What was I doing? Well, it was when I was leading a team, and the communication just felt right. We weren't overthinking it. It was just automatic, and I was the leader of that, and I'd been involved in the strategy, and the outcome was a clearly defined, tangible outcome where we all achieved our objective. Right. Okay. So you want to be in a team. You want to have clear defined goals, and you want to be the leader. Like there's some examples of when you're in flow, and you can start to paint a picture of what that might look like. So if they're to do like one exercise, I would say do that. And I would say that whatever it is you feel you want to go for, just check in with yourself. What is the intention of this decision I'm about to make? Is it to avoid a fear? Is it to move away from pain? Or is it a towards decision? Am I moving towards something because I truly love it?
And I love that as well. That's fantastic. Really just taking a step back, thinking about where is yourself. Fantastic, Jim. Well, Jim, how can people get in contact with you?
On LinkedIn, Jim Hughes, and then Untamed is my company. I've got a website, becomeuntamed.com. You can reach me through that by subscribing to the newsletter, or just the contact form through there. They're probably the 2 easiest ways. I'm on Instagram, but I don't sort of do the messaging much on that, so that's probably not the best way. Those will be the 2 best ways.
Okay, fantastic. We will include all of those things in the show notes. Jim, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for all that you're doing to help people be in alignment, be themselves, and really, really think things through as they prepare to exit the military.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.